Over 22 million people visit the Peak District every year, and it is small wonder that they do, with all that it has to offer. With this film, I hope to bring back fond memories to those who have previously visited here, and to introduce it to those who have not yet been so fortunate. There is so much natural beauty within the Peak District, so I'll try to show you all the well-known locations and also those which may not be quite so familiar to you. Almost every visitor to Derbyshire makes at least one visit to Dovedale. In places, the action of water has worn away the rocks into curious formations, like the Lion's Head, Ilham Rock, Pickering's Cave, 12 Apostles, and many other features which can be seen as you walk along the dale. The white limestone rocks are the remains of a coral reef, which was a vast tropically warm sea dated 330 million years ago. Dovedale has numerous literary associations. Dr. Johnson, Byron, Tennyson and Ruskin all praised its scenery with enthusiasm. Its closest association was with Isaac Walton and Charles Cotton, authors of the 17th century classic The Complete Angler. There are fine views from the heights which overlook the valley from Thorpe Cloud and Bunster that will amply reward the walker with sights of great beauty. The reputation of the Dove as an angler's river, and particularly as a river for trout fishing, has lasted from the time of Charles Cotton to the present day. Much of Dovedale is now protected by the National Trust, and the dale forms the major part of the South Peak estate. Nearby in the Manifold Valley is the spectacular Thor's Cave with its huge 60-foot entrance situated some 250 feet above the River Manifold. The cave itself is not very deep, and many archaeological remains have been excavated, including a complete Neolithic skeleton. There is a steep climb up to the entrance of the cave, but the view more than compensates for this. The whole area is one of natural outstanding beauty. As you carry on up the valley following the Manifold River, you will arrive at Wetton Mill, a pretty place to rest for the traveller in need of refreshment. You will need to cross the bridge to get to the tea rooms, which have facilities and car parking space for patrons. The Manifold Valley has crags and features as interesting as you will find in Dovedale. The rivers have an unusual habit of disappearing underground and reappearing unexpectedly. The track bed of the old railway has been surfaced with tarmac and is now a footpath. When the track was built at the beginning of the century, the locomotives were copies of those built for the Barsi Light Railway in India. The engines and picturesque coaches have long since gone, but some of the railway buildings survive at Hume End. As you pass through the short railway tunnel at Swainsley, you will see the fishing house dated 1674 that was built by Charles Cotton. Although the fishing house is on private land, it can be seen from the footpath or roadside. This has now been restored by the National Trust. The deep valleys clearly have had an influence on the distribution and location of many of the villages scattered throughout Derbyshire. At the end of the Manifold Valley is Ilham, an unspoilt village consisting of a school, as pretty as you will find anywhere, and cottages that are idyllic and could have been taken straight out of a fairy tale picture book. The Gothic cross in the centre of Ilam village near the bridge was erected in memory of Mrs. Watts Russell, who formerly lived at Ilam Hall, and which was presented to the National Trust in 1934 as a youth hostel. The church, which stands in the grounds of the hall, was rebuilt during the 19th century. There are 2 Saxon crosses in the churchyard, and inside the church is the tomb of St. Bertram and Sir Francis Chantry's statue of David Pike Watts. The hall is of specific interest. There is an information centre and a National Trust shop, while at the rear of the hall is a tea room in the stable room of the Watts Russell house. The view from the terrace is magnificent, and also within the grounds is the ancient shrine of St. Bertram, who is reputed to have lived in these parts in Anglo-Saxon times and to have converted the district to Christianity. You could start your exploration of the Manifold Valley from Ilam, and there is excellent accommodation at the nearby Isaac Walton Hotel, which has local fishing rights. We are now in the delightful village of Alstonfield, near Hartington. There are several interesting buildings, including the church, which has fine carved oak pews. Charles Cotton's family pew is in this church. The village has a post office, a gift and gallery shop, and there is an excellent pub which is extremely popular with ramblers. Everything about Tissington is impressive. The entrance gate and the lodge on the Ashbourne and Buxton Road, the avenue of lime trees, and the model village built as though in a park. Although celebrated for its ceremonies of Wells dressing, it is well worth a visit at any time of the year, for it is one of the most delightful villages in Derbyshire. It is said that the first Wells dressing took place at Tissington more than 600 years ago. Considerable effort is devoted to the decoration of each of the 6 wells. Flower petals, moss and berries are gathered and pressed into clay bases to form a design or to illustrate a biblical scene. An appropriate text is added and the whole decoration is mounted over the well. A ceremony takes place annually on Ascension Day. After a service in Tissington's fine old Norman church, a procession visits each well in turn, and the water is blessed. Tissington Hall, the home of the Fitzherbert family, is a fine specimen of Jacobean architecture. It was built in 16... is now an information centre. Bakewell Market has been in existence since 1330. Many a happy hour has been spent on the riverside promenades and souvenir shopping in town. Bakewell was once quite well known for its iron-rich springs and boasts some fine gardens. Chatsworth, known as the Palace of the Peak, is the home of the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire. Much of the present house was built by the 1st and 6th Dukes in the 17th and early 19th centuries, and stands in the renowned gardens designed by Capability Brown. The Emperor's Fountain is the highest gravity-fed fountain in the world, constructed by Paxton in 1844, and there are cascades in the gardens. The fountain can lower an 8-acre reservoir by 4 inches per hour and is fed by the Emperor's Lake, which stands above the house at the rear. When you walk in the grounds, the views can be very rewarding as you gain height. You may well pass cannons from a ship which fought at Trafalgar. These cannons have not been fired since 1926. Nearby is the Hunting Tower or Stand Tower, which was built around 1582. This aqueduct was built in 1839. Whilst walking the parkland, it's worth bearing in mind that the paths can be slippery and somewhat steep in places. Originally sited in full view of Chatsworth, the village of Ensor was moved, with the exception of one house, because it spoiled the view from the main house. Pilsley, a small village, contains Chatsworth Farm Shop, selling produce from the estate. The village has Wells dressings and a school built in 1849 by Joseph Paxton. Along the A6 from Bakewell stands Haddon, much of which dates from the 14th and 15th century. The hall, which stands on a bluff, overlooks the river and boasts some fine gardens. The Vernon family were the main builders, and George Vernon, one of the family, was known as the King of the Peak. The hall is particularly well known for its magnificent medieval banqueting hall, fine oak panelling and large open fireplaces. There is a romantic story about Dorothy Vernon and John Manners. Further along the A6 at Roseley you'll find Corwell's Mill. This is an historic water-powered flour mill which still produces flour for sale. It now offers guided tours, gift and craft shops. Robin Hood's Stride, which is also known as Mock Beggar's Hall, is a gritstone outcrop, and nearby is a local landmark known as the Hermit's Cave. From Robin Hood's Stride, you can see a stone circle on Harthill Moor. Originally 9 stones, only 4 are now standing. Arbour Low, known as the Stonehenge of the Peak, dates from the Bronze Age, approximately 2000 BC. Located near Yulegrave and Monash, the stones can be seen in a recumbent position. The main circle has a circumference of 812 feet, enclosed by a ditch. Bronze Age remains have been excavated. Stanton Moor, where prehistoric remains have been found. Thought to have been a burial ground, the stone circle is known as the Nine Ladies, and dates from around 1500 BC. Other stones also have been named, such as Twopenny Loaf and Cork Stone. The square tower, put up by a member of the Thornhill family, commemorates Earl Grey and the passing of the Reform Bill of 1832. Stanton Moor consists of gritstone, and old lead mines and quarries abound. There are plenty of easy walks with good views, and is owned by the National Trust. Matlock was once noted for its many imposing hydros, but today they are no longer operating. However, the buildings remain. On Thursday, December the 9th, 1965, the river rose to an all-time height and flooded Matlock town centre. The River Derwent normally flows about 15 feet below the bridge. On the hill just outside Matlock is Ryber Castle. It was built in the 19th century and is now a wildlife zoo and park. Matlock Bath is just along the A6 from Matlock. The houses were built by wealthy Victorians who came for the spa waters. These days it's very popular with the tourists, particularly during the autumn with its annual illuminations. To many visitors, the beauty of Matlock Bath is its hills and dales. Some have unusual names such as Black Rock and Wishing Stone, and there is a promenade above the river to be enjoyed. Cromford grew as the result of the prosperous mills built by Sir Richard Arkwright. These mills are over 200 years old and are the first factories in the world where a major source of power was utilised. Now there are shops and a cafe for the visitors. There is a steam fair held annually, and the canals at Cromford have a society which takes care of them. There are over 40 vehicles at the Crouch Tramway Museum. Some of these collection are from overseas. They vary from a horse-drawn tram from Sheffield of 1874 to another tram from Sheffield of 1950. Part of the museum is still under restoration, and the staff there have asked for the public for their assistance with any information and photographs which might help. There are souvenir shops and a cafe, and the whole museum is designed to recreate the Victorian age gone by. Overlooking the museum at the edge of a quarry is Crouch Stand, a war memorial of the Sherwood foresters who fell in the two great wars. The steps inside become very steep, and the tower with its beacon light stands 950 feet above sea level. The most memorable aspect of the Peak District are the views across the valleys. Millersdale, which lies between Tideswell and Buxton, is one of those secret and peaceful corners of this unspoilt area. Once an important route for the trains between Manchester and Derby, but these days are long since past. Cheadale, which is nearby Millersdale, has footpaths which are rough ballast and unsuitable for cyclists and horses, although every part of this dale is a delight for the walker. The viaduct reminds us again of the importance of these dales when trains ran between the big cities. When the river is in flood, the paths can quite often become unpassable. Huge lime kilns were opened in 1880 to meet increasing demands for quicklime. These were closed again in 1944. You can still walk into the base of the kiln. During the Second World War, metal caps had to be fitted to black out the tops. The Monsell Trail, with its picnic places, starts in Cheadale, but more familiar is the viaduct at Monsell Dale. This viaduct was built in 1860 and much criticised by John Ruskin. Before you descend into the Dale, there are gift shops, a cafe and a pub for refreshment. Not all the scenic landscapes have innocent history. This is Peter's Stone near Lytton. In 1815, Anthony Lingard had murdered a tollkeeper in Wardlow Mires. For this he was executed and his body left to rot on a gibbet for all to see. The pretty village of Tideswell has more than its fair share of character and hospitality. It was granted a market charter in 1250. Tideswell is renowned for its Wakes Week and Wells dressings, which are annual events. The church is known as the Cathedral of the Peak and was built entirely during the 14th century. It contains brasses, carved woodwork and other relics of its ancient benefactors. The church at Hathersage has a most interesting feature. The grave is reputed to be that of Little John, friend and companion of Robin Hood. It is claimed that a thigh bone that measured 32 inches long was found, and this would indicate that the person would have stood over 7 feet high. The grave is over 13 feet long. They still talk about the plague at Eyam as though it was last week, and it is still the main reason why people visit the place today. It is a tragic story of human gallantry which will never be forgotten. The plague arrived in Eyam by way of a delivery of contaminated clothes, which then resulted in 5 out of 6 villagers losing their lives within a few months. Eam Hall was built by Thomas Wright in 1671, and the Wright family have lived there ever since. The interior is a fine example of a 17th century house and beautifully maintained. Of course, the Peak District is a farming area, and where there are sheep, there will be sheepdogs. These trials are held annually at Bamford for the sheepdogs and their masters to show off their skills. With all the cups, trophies and awards to be won, it is a fiercely contested competition. There are a number of caverns at Castleton. The most famous one is Blue John. This stone, which is found nowhere else in the world, was much favoured by the Victorians. The caverns attract several thousands of visitors every month. The Peak Cavern has an entrance of 120 feet wide by 60 feet high and is the second largest in the world. It's Derbyshire's largest and deepest natural cavern open to the public. Peak Cavern is under the ruins of Peveril Castle, built by the Normans, and the keep and part of the retaining wall still remains. The walk up is very steep, but not as steep as the other side. Morris dancing takes place on special events, and the garland ceremony happens on Oak Apple Day. The Garland King and his lady proceed on horse through the village. The garland weighs around 60 pounds. The garland is hoisted onto a pinnacle of the church tower after the top bunch of flowers have been placed on the war memorial. Aerial sports over the dales are very popular activities for those with a head for heights. The views from up there over the valley at Edale must be the most thrilling of all. Although you wouldn't think it now, the village of Edale is very popular with skiers in the winter months. It is more famous for marking the beginning of the Pennine Way. There is a path that takes you on to Kinder Scout, and Kinder Scout is the highest plateau in Derbyshire. This makes it a potentially dangerous area if the weather turns. The mountain rescue teams have to be ready to face the risks whenever a walker gets into difficulty. The Derwent Valley and Lady Bower Reservoir are just off the Snake Pass Road. The dams were used by Dr. Barnes-Wallis and his team to test his bouncing bomb, and the film The Dam Busters was shot here. When they built the dams, the villages of Ashupton and Derwent were completely submerged. The whole area is a magnet for visitors. This is especially so if the dam levels drop to reveal some of the foundations of the lost villages. The church was blown up in 1947. The Goyt Valley is about 4 miles southwest of Buxton. It has retained the natural beauty of the surrounding area and richness of vegetation. The twin reservoirs of Irwood and Ferny Lee now occupy much of the valley. The ruins of Irwood Hall remain, and many of the old hall's rhododendrons survive today and are well worth seeing in summer. There are footpaths through the woods, part of the Irwood Trail, and they pass the Old Hall ruins. Solomon's Temple was built as a lookout tower by Mr. Solomon Mycock in 1896 to provide labour for out-of-work men. It overlooks Buxton and can be reached by taking the path from Poole's Cavern or the Harper Hill Grinlow Road. Buxton stands nearly 1,000 feet above sea level. In the town centre, at the bottom of the slopes, is the fine 18th century crescent, built on the site of a Roman bath. St Anne's Well is opposite, and the health-giving waters may be drunk freely today. Mary Queen of Scots came here to bathe and drink at the healing waters. Almost of equal importance to the spa waters is the River Wye. Around this mountain stream have been created the Serpentine area, Ashwood Park and the Pavilion Gardens. Buxton has its own opera house where the Buxton Festival has been established. The Pavilion, its gardens and conservatory with its abundance of fragrant and colourful flowers are a must for the visitor. There is no entrance fee. pavilion has a gift shop, cafe, and regularly is the venue for a variety of functions. I hope that you have enjoyed this guided film tour and that you have had a memorable visit. The ancient craft of well dressing, as it is done today, is seen nowhere else. The dressing of a well requires much skill, patience and endurance. It is a good time for the village community spirit to come together with a collection of qualities and skills to focus their efforts on a mystical and inspiring ceremony. For the visitors who travel from all parts of the world to see this unique display of artistry, a sense of admiration has to be drawn from the scenes that each well depicts and for the people who have designed and created them. No two places assemble their wells in quite the same way. The first requirement is a strong boarded framework, possibly as many as 5 or 6 pieces. These are usually made locally. The screens will have to be soaked in the rivers or ponds first, and then covered with clay. The clay is puddled with water and salt to a uniform plastic consistency and then applied as a layer from half to an inch thick to all pieces of the framework. The salt will keep the clay moist to prevent cracking in the sun and wind, as well as help in preserving the freshness of the flowers. Protruding from the board are hundreds of nails which will help to key the clay. As with so many things in life, preparation is of the utmost importance. All foreign objects are removed and the clay is worked to a soft butter-like consistency. After the preparation of the boards, fresh vegetation is gathered to add to other dried materials already to hand. The drawing, which has been previously prepared on paper, is then applied to the smooth surface of the clay and the design pricked through with an awl or other sharp instrument. The paper is then peeled off, leaving behind a clear outline of the design on the clay. Now the experts who dress the well can set to work. All the materials that go into dressing the wells are purely organic, such as wool, flowers, moss, corn, and everything has a special effect on the end result. In this particular case, wool and, as you'll see, sweet corn are used.
Okay, well, what I'm doing here is building up the faces, and eventually I shall be doing the hands on Saul at the bottom and his legs, building them up in low relief, getting some muscles in his legs and all his fingers and some detail on his face. And then these, when the low relief has been built up, which seems to give very good light and shade to the actual details, they will then be painted on top of the clay using entirely natural colours, colours made from ground earth, soot, not quite sure what we... I think the white is ground chalk that we use. But all the actual colourings, not poster paints or acrylics or anything like that, but all absolutely natural colours are used. The building up and using this low relief on the facial and hand details is not desperately traditional. There have been quite a lot of other methods used for using face tones. One of them was to use crushed up eggshells and placing little bits of eggshell all over to make it look pink and flesh coloured, and also just painting the outline onto the flat clay. But the use of a bit of low relief in the actual modelling does seem to make the facial details stand out very well from a distance. And a lot of the wells now seem to be doing it this way.
The morning of the blessing is a frantic time, for all the wells in any one village are being erected at first light. I think there might be some friendly rivalry between each group of dressers. Some villages may have 5 or 6 wells to dress, while others might dress just 1 or 2. It depends on the size of the village or town and the amount of voluntary help available. Derbyshire is the only place that performs this celebration in this manner, There is nothing anywhere like it except possibly in Italy, where they lay flowers on the streets and not on boards. The event of Wells dressing in each village is held at different times of the year. Tissington is first. Almost as soon as the Wells are dressed, visitors arrive to see the boards in place, and now everyone can take in the full beauty and appreciate the effort that has gone into all the separate stages. Regular visitors may be able to recognise many of the distinctive Wells dressing boards from the villages and towns. I hope you have enjoyed our brief look at Wells dressings in Derbyshire. It is perhaps appropriate to leave you with a few words from the annual Blessing of the Wells service.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.